I've always been the type of person who checks their tickets 3 times before boarding. Obsessive, my sister calls it. Paranoid, my ex-boyfriend said. But it's kept me from missing flights, catching trains at the wrong time, and generally avoiding the kind of disorganization that ruins people's lives. So when I found the ticket in my jacket pocket on that gray October morning in 2019, I did what I always do. I examined it closely. The ticket was for the 3:45 p.m. Northeast Regional from Boston to Portsmouth. I'd booked it the night before, just like I did every Friday when I'd visit my mother before her chemotherapy appointments on Monday mornings. The ticket itself looked authentic enough. The ticket number was there, my confirmation code printed in that familiar font Amtrak uses. My name was correct. The date was right, October 18th, a Friday. Everything checked out, except for the destination. The ticket clearly read, Final Stop, Greystone Station NH. I stared at it for a long time, standing in my Cambridge kitchen with a half-empty coffee mug steaming beside my laptop. I'd printed this ticket myself. I remember doing it. I'd selected the Portsmouth stop like I always did, because Portsmouth was where my mother lived, in the old Victorian house on Marcy Street that my grandfather had built in 1952. It was only 20 minutes from there to her place. I opened my email and pulled up the confirmation. It was different. The confirmation said Portsmouth. But the ticket in my hand, the physical piece of paper that had come out of my printer, said Greystone Station. I checked the printer history. Nothing unusual. I went back to the Amtrak website and looked at my booking. Portsmouth was still there in my account. 1 destination, 1 stop, arriving at 6:20 p.m. But the ticket said Greystone. I told myself it was a glitch, a printing error. Maybe Amtrak had an old template in their system that was accidentally activated. I called customer service, waited 30 minutes on hold while a recording assured me that my call was very important to them, and finally got through to a tired-sounding representative named Kevin. That's weird, he said after I explained the situation. Let me look into this. I listened to him type. The sound of a keyboard clicking was the only thing between me and my growing sense of unease. I'm looking at your account right now, Kevin said slowly. The booking is for Portsmouth. Definitely Portsmouth. We don't have a Greystone Station in our system. We don't? I asked. Not in New Hampshire, no. Let me run a search. No, nothing. No Greystone anywhere on our routes. Are you sure that's what your ticket says? I looked at it again. The letters were crisp and black, printed clearly on what appeared to be genuine Amtrak stock. Yes, it definitely says Greystone Station NH. Kevin went quiet for a moment. Okay, here's what I'll do. I'm going to cancel that ticket and reissue you a new one. You should have it in your email within the next hour. Just print a fresh copy and you'll be all set. But what about the one I already have? I asked. Just discard it. It's probably a corrupted file or something weird with the printing process. These things happen. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. Not massively. I wasn't the type to spiral into panic, but there was something about the ticket that bothered me. It seemed too intentional to be a simple glitch. The information was too specific, too real-looking, and most disturbing, I didn't recognize the name at all. Greystone Station. It meant nothing to me. I'd lived in Massachusetts my whole life and had family connections throughout New England. I'd never heard of a place called Greystone in New Hampshire. I pulled up Google Maps and searched for Greystone NH. Nothing. No town called Greystone. I tried different spellings, Greystones, Greystone, Greystone Station specifically. Nothing came up. Just some real estate listings for houses built on Greystone foundations, some references to psychiatric hospitals with that name, one in Rhode Island, one in Massachusetts, but no New Hampshire town. The new ticket came through email as promised. I printed it. It said Portsmouth. Everything was fine. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that this was exactly the kind of thing that paranoid people obsess over, and I needed to let it go. I put the corrected ticket in my bag and I threw the old one away. Except I didn't. Not really. I meant to. But when I took out the trash, the ticket was still in my jacket pocket. I found it again as I was getting dressed and something made me keep it. Some instinct told me that this wasn't right, that I needed to hold on to this piece of evidence. I put it in my wallet behind my driver's license. I didn't think about it again until I got to South Station. The Northeast Regional was crowded when I boarded. Friday evening, everyone heading north for the weekend or to visit family. I found my seat, 35B window seat, and settled in with my phone. The train departed exactly on time. I watched Boston shrink away as we pulled out of the station, heading north through the commuter towns and into the Massachusetts countryside. The route was familiar. We'd pass through Providence, then continue northeast toward the Connecticut-Massachusetts border, then cut through the corner of Connecticut before entering Rhode Island again, and finally up through southeastern Massachusetts toward Portsmouth. It was a journey I'd taken dozens of times. I could practically narrate the route in my sleep, but something felt different this time. I can't quite explain what it was. The light seemed wrong, too yellow, almost sepia-toned, though the day itself hadn't been particularly overcast. The other passengers seemed too quiet. There was no soundtrack of conversations and phone notifications that usually filled a train car. Everyone sat in silence, staring at their phones or out the windows. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through Twitter, but I kept looking up, studying the other passengers. An older man across the aisle and 3 rows up. A young mother with a toddler who sat motionless in her lap, not playing with toys or crying, just sitting there. A teenager with enormous headphones on, though I could see no wire, no device. Just the headphones. And an empty seat next to him. The train pulled into Providence. People got off. New people got on. Nothing unusual. I checked my phone. 5:15 p.m. We were right on schedule. But as we left Providence, I noticed something that made my skin prickle. The conductor who came through checking tickets, a woman with gray hair and a plastic name tag that read Margaret, didn't scan my ticket with the portable reader. She just looked at it, looked at my face, and handed it back. "All set," she said, and moved on. I looked at the ticket. It said Portsmouth. My new ticket. The correct one. So why did I feel like something had been registered? Like I'd been logged into a system I wasn't aware of? As the train continued north, the landscape outside became gradually less familiar. We passed through Rhode Island and entered Massachusetts, and then somewhere around what should have been the Connecticut border, I realized I didn't recognize anything outside the window. The towns we passed through didn't look right. The station signs were weathered and faded. I pulled up Google Maps on my phone to check our location, but the GPS icon just spun and spun. No signal. That was unusual. The Northeast corridor usually had decent coverage. I told myself I was being paranoid again. I was overthinking this. A glitchy GPS, a corrupted ticket file, a tired conductor. These were all normal things. Nothing was actually wrong. But something was. Around 5:45, I needed to use the bathroom. I got up and walked toward the back of the car, passing the same passengers I'd seen before. They hadn't moved. The toddler still sat motionless. The teenager still wore the wireless headphones. No one had gotten off in Providence. I was sure of it. The bathroom was vacant. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired. I splashed water on my face and tried to calm down. "You're being crazy," I told myself. "You're being absolutely crazy." When I returned to my seat, I pulled out the old ticket, the one that said Greystone Station, and stared at it. The printing was so clear, so precise, almost too perfect, like it had been printed specifically for me, as if this whole thing had been planned. I checked the time. 5:58 p.m. We should be approaching Portsmouth any minute now. The conductor would come through the car again, doing a final walkthrough before the stop. Everything would be normal. I'd get off at Portsmouth, take a taxi to my mother's house, and all of this anxiety would seem foolish in the morning light. The train began to slow. I leaned toward the window, expecting to see the familiar lights of Portsmouth approaching. Instead, I saw something else. A sign. A train station sign, old and weathered, the letters barely visible through the grime. I couldn't quite read it at first. The train was moving too fast. But as we slowed to a stop, the letters became clear. Greystone Station. My heart stopped. I stared at the sign, waiting for it to resolve into something else, something that made sense. But it didn't change. The letters didn't rearrange themselves. They were clear and definite. Greystone Station and H. This wasn't possible. Greystone Station didn't exist. I checked. No such place appeared on any map, any website, any official record. And yet here we were, coming to a stop at a platform marked with that impossible name. I looked around the car. Other passengers were gathering their things. The older man stood up. The woman with the toddler gathered a small bag. The teenager removed his wireless headphones. People were preparing to exit. The train came to a complete stop. I didn't get up. I sat frozen in my seat, watching as people began to move into the aisle, grabbing bags and coats. The conductor, Margaret or someone who looked exactly like her, appeared at the front of the car. Greystone Station, she announced, her voice flat and mechanical. Final stop. Greystone Station. All passengers will disembark. Final stop. But my ticket said Portsmouth. My original confirmation said Portsmouth. I'd booked Portsmouth. This was wrong. I pulled out my new ticket and stared at it. Portsmouth. It definitely said Portsmouth. But the old ticket, crumpled in my other hand, the one I'd thrown away but kept, still said Greystone. The older man passed my seat. The woman with the toddler. The teenager. One by one, all the other passengers filed toward the exit. None of them looked uncertain. None of them looked confused. They filed out with the mechanical precision of people following a script they'd memorized. I was the only one left in the car. "Excuse me," I called out to Margaret, who was now standing by the exit door. "I think there's been a mistake. My ticket is for Portsmouth. This isn't Portsmouth." She looked at me, and something about her expression made my blood go cold. It was perfectly pleasant, perfectly professional, and perfectly empty. There was nothing behind her eyes. She was looking at me the way someone might look at a television. "Your ticket is for Greystone Station," she said. "No," I said, standing up, holding out the new ticket. "No, look, it says Portsmouth. I printed this at home." Amtrak confirmed. "Your ticket is for Greystone Station," she repeated. "You will disembark now." "I'm not getting off at the wrong stop," I said, hearing the edge of panic in my voice. "I need to get to Portsmouth. I need to see my mother. I'm getting back on this train and—" "The train is not continuing further," Margaret said. "This is the final stop. All passengers disembark." I looked out the window. There was a platform outside, dimly lit by old-fashioned lamps. The station beyond the platform was strange. It seemed to be constructed partially of brick and partially of something else, something that looked almost like stone that was wrong somehow, that seemed to reflect light in ways stone shouldn't. The sky above was dark, though my phone said it was only 6:12 p.m. It should still be twilight. It should still be light out. "I'm not getting off," I said. Margaret didn't argue. She simply waited, her empty eyes fixed on mine. "I'm calling someone," I said, pulling out my phone. No signal. "I'm calling the police." "There is no one to call," Margaret said. "You are at Greystone Station. This is your destination." "This is not my destination. My mother lives in Portsmouth. I have an appointment on Monday morning." "I'm not." And then the doors hissed closed. I watched in horror as they sealed shut, cutting off my view of the platform. I rushed to the window and pressed my face against the glass. Margaret was still standing outside, looking up at me with that empty expression. The platform beyond her was empty. The station beyond that was silent. I ran to the door and tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. I looked for emergency buttons or latches, but the door was seamless, impossible to manipulate. I ran from car to car, frantically looking for another exit. All the doors were the same. All of them sealed. The train lurched into motion. I stumbled forward as it began to accelerate, regained my balance, and ran back to the window. Through the glass, I watched as Greystone Station receded into the darkness behind us. The platform. The station. The impossible stone structure that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. All of it pulled away into the night. I pressed my hands against the window, and that's when I felt it, a vibration in the glass. Not from the train's movement. Something else. Something that felt almost like a pulse. I jerked my hands away and stumbled backward. The train car was empty now. Just me and the rows of empty seats. I looked at the seat where the older man had sat, where the woman with the toddler had been, where the teenager had waited with his wireless headphones. The seats didn't look like they'd ever been occupied. The fabric was clean. No depression in the cushions. No sign that anyone had ever sat there. I pulled out my phone and tried to take a screenshot of my ticket. The camera app froze. I opened my email to look at the original confirmation. The email was gone. I scrolled through my inbox. Emails from my mother, my work, my friend Sarah, my sister. But nothing from Amtrak. No confirmation emails. No booking confirmations. It was like they'd been erased. I sat down hard in my seat. The train continued on through darkness. Through windows that now showed nothing but black. No towns, no lights, no landscape. Just a void. I don't know how long I sat there. Time began to feel strange. My phone said it was 6:47 p.m. when I checked it. Then 6:48. Then 6:49. I checked again 10 minutes later. It still said 6:49. The battery indicator was at 100%, unchanged, as if my phone was locked in that moment. I tried to walk the length of the train. The cars seemed to extend further than they should have. The Northeast regional trains have 8 cars. I counted as I walked through. Car 1, Car 2, Car 3, Car 4, Car 5, Car 6, Car 7, Car 8. And then another car. Then another. Car 10. Car 11. The numbering system changed. Instead of numbers, they had names. The obsidian car. The turning car. The waiting car. I didn't read all the names. I was too frightened to go further. I turned around and walked back, and the journey seemed shorter this time. The cars flowed into each other differently. The seating arrangements were different. In one car, all the seats faced backward. In another, they were arranged in a circle around an empty center space. In one I passed through, the seats looked like they were facing into the walls, as if designed for people who didn't want to see anything. I found myself in what appeared to be a dining car. Tables set for meals that would never be eaten. Place settings of dishes and silverware, a glass of water at each place, all of it cold and untouched. And at one table, a newspaper. I picked it up with trembling hands. The date on the front was October 18, 2019. Today's date. But the banner read, "Local woman missing after boarding train, destination unknown." I didn't read the article. I couldn't. I threw the newspaper down like it had burned me. I kept walking through the dining car and into another passenger car, and this one was different from the others. The seats were occupied. There were people here. About 15 of them scattered throughout the car, sitting in the same motionless silence as the passengers in the original car. They didn't acknowledge my presence. Didn't look at me. Didn't move at all. I walked past them slowly, studying their faces. They were all different people, different ages, races, genders, but they had something in common. Something I couldn't quite identify. It took me a moment to realize none of them looked quite right. The proportions of their features were subtly off. The way they sat was too still, too perfect. They looked like very good mannequins or very realistic paintings of people, rather than actual humans. I backed out of that car and didn't return to it. Instead, I found myself moving toward the locomotive, climbing through the narrow passages between cars, descending stairs that spiraled in wrong directions. At one point, I found a window that showed me outside. The landscape had changed. We were passing through a forest, but the trees were wrong. They were too tall, and their trunks were too smooth, and the spaces between them were perfectly regular, like rows in a plantation. No undergrowth. No rocks. No forest sounds, though I had to have heard something, and I hadn't heard anything since we left Greystone Station. I must have walked for hours. The train never slowed. The sound of the wheels on the tracks was rhythmic and constant, almost hypnotic. I found a conductor's cabin at one point and tried the door. It was locked. I looked through the small window and saw rows of gauges and switches, but nothing that looked like it was actually being operated. The cabin appeared to be empty, though something about it suggested that someone had been there very recently. Exhaustion finally drove me back to the original passenger car. I found my seat, 35B, still waiting for me. I sat down and stared out the window at nothing. That's when I noticed the passenger across the aisle. I hadn't seen them before. I was certain of it. I'd walked that car multiple times and all the seats had been empty. But now, in the seat across from me, a woman sat watching me. She was older, in her 60s or 70s perhaps, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore clothing that looked like it was from the 1980s. A wool jacket in a muted color, a blouse with a small pattern, sensible shoes. She looked exactly like someone's grandmother. And she was smiling at me. "You're wondering what this place is," she said. Her voice was soft, kind even. I couldn't manage an answer. My throat had closed up. "It's called many things," she continued, not bothered by my silence. "The waiting station. The place between. The nowhere train. But those are just names. Names don't really matter." She gestured to the seat next to her. "Please sit here. Talk to me. Who are you?" I managed. "My name is Patricia," she said. "I've been waiting here for a very long time. Since 1963. That's when I boarded a train from Boston to visit my daughter in Portland, Maine. I never arrived. Much like you." I shook my head. "This isn't real. This is a hallucination. I'm having some kind of nervous breakdown and I'm imagining all of this." "If it helps you to believe that, then believe it," Patricia said without judgment. "But I've been here for 56 years. I've watched many people board this train. I've learned to recognize the signs. The Greystone station in your ticket is one. The way the light felt wrong to you. The passengers who didn't move. The conductor who looked at you but didn't see you. These are all signs that you belong here." "I don't belong here," I said, my voice rising. "I booked a ticket to Portsmouth. I'm going to see my mother. This is insane." "Yes," Patricia said calmly. "It is rather insane. Insanity is often the most accurate way to describe what happens when you step outside the normal world. The normal world operates on certain rules. You broke those rules without realizing it." "What rules? What are you talking about?" Patricia settled back in her seat, making herself more comfortable. "The rules are subtle and most people never notice them because they follow them naturally. One of those rules is that you must never board a train when your ticket says something different than what you believe it should say. The ticket is a binding document. If it says Greystone Station, then that's where the train goes regardless of what you think you booked. Regardless of what Amtrak's website tells you. The ticket is the truth." "That's insane," I whispered. "Perhaps," Patricia agreed. "But it is the truth nonetheless. When I booked my ticket in 1963, it said Portland Station when I printed it. But I had the same moment of doubt that you did. I called the railroad. They assured me it was an error. They issued me a new ticket. But when I got to South Station, my original ticket was in my pocket. I was so afraid of getting on the wrong train, you see, that I kept both. And when I boarded, the conductor looked at me the way Margaret looked at you, and I knew something was wrong." "So you're saying we're on the wrong train," I said. "We can get off. We can refuse to stay here." "We can refuse," Patricia said. "But there's no one to refuse to. The train operates according to its own logic. It doesn't care what we want or what we believe we've booked. It simply goes where it goes, carrying those of us who belong in it." "And where does it go?" Patricia didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window at the darkness beyond. "Everywhere," she said finally. "Nowhere. The stations it visits exist in a space that's adjacent to the normal world. They're places that have been forgotten. Places that never should have existed in the first place. Stations that were built and then erased from maps. Towns that disappeared. Destinations that exist only on the wrong tickets." "And the people?" I asked. "The ones who were sitting here before?" "Gone," Patricia said simply. "Or transformed. Or both. After a certain amount of time on the train, people stop waiting. They make a choice." "What choice?" "They get off at whatever stop comes next. And then they're gone and we all move on. The train brings new passengers. The cycle continues." I stood up suddenly. "I don't accept this. I don't accept any of this. This is a dream. I'm going to wake up and this will all make sense and—" "You're going to panic," Patricia said gently. "And you're going to run through the train again looking for a way out. You're going to try the emergency cord. You're going to bang on the windows. You're going to scream. And eventually you're going to get tired and you're going to come back here and you're going to sit down again. And we're going to have another conversation much like this one. I've seen it happen many times. I wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to demonstrate that there was some way out of this, some logic to this situation that would break in the face of determination and rational thought. But I was exhausted. I'd been walking for hours through impossible hallways in an increasingly impossible train. And somewhere deeper than reason or panic, I knew that Patricia was right. I sat back down. How long? I asked. How long does someone usually stay? It varies, Patricia said. Some people are here for a few days. Some for weeks. Some for months. I've been here for 56 years, but time works differently here. Feels like it's been much longer. Or perhaps it's been no time at all. It's hard to say. What happens at the end? I asked. When you get off at wherever the next stop is? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she said finally. No one who gets off ever comes back. But I imagine they finally go where they were supposed to go in the first place. I imagine they're reunited with the people they were meant to see. I imagine it's probably quite peaceful. But you haven't gone, I said. Why? Because I'm afraid, Patricia said, and there was a deep sadness in her voice. I'm afraid that it won't be peaceful. I'm afraid that there will be nothing or something worse. I'm afraid that my daughter won't recognize me after all these years. I'm afraid of being wrong about all of this. So I wait, and I wait, and I wait. Over the following hours, or what felt like hours though my phone had stopped updating, I learned more about Patricia and the train. She told me about other passengers she'd encountered. A man named David who boarded in 1975 with a ticket for a station in Vermont that never existed. A young woman named Sophie who got on in 1993 with a ticket to somewhere so strange that Patricia couldn't even pronounce the name. A businessman named Marcus who, in 2007, had boarded with what appeared to be a completely normal ticket, only to find it changed while he was holding it, shifting from one destination to another as he watched. Patricia said she'd watched people get off. She said that most of them did so willingly after a time. That they simply decided they were tired of waiting and that whatever came next had to be better than this. But she also said that some of them didn't get off willingly. What do you mean? I asked. The train sometimes stops, Patricia explained, and the doors simply open. And the person in question walks out as if in a trance, as if something is calling to them. As if they have no choice in the matter. Those are the ones I worry about. I was sitting with Patricia still in the same seats facing each other when the train began to slow. I felt it first as a slight decrease in the constant rhythm of the wheels on the tracks. The subtle shift that indicates deceleration. My heart immediately began to race. We're coming to a stop, I said. Patricia nodded. Yes, I felt it too. Is it time? Are we going to? I don't know, Patricia said. It's only been a few hours since you boarded. Usually, people stay longer before the train stops again. The train continued to slow. Through the window, I could see something appearing in the darkness. Lights. Platform lights. Another station. I leaned toward the window trying to see the sign. The letters were picking up the glow of the platform lamps, and they slowly resolved into a name. Hollow Crossing. Hollow Crossing, Patricia murmured. I haven't heard that name before. The train came to a complete stop. For a long moment, nothing happened. The doors didn't open. No conductor appeared to announce the destination. But I could feel something. A pressure building in the air. A presence. Something out there on the platform, waiting for something inside to respond. Then Margaret appeared at the far end of the car. She walked toward us with that same mechanical stride, her face blank and professional, and she stopped beside a seat 2 rows ahead of us, a seat that had been empty before. And as we watched, a man appeared in that seat. He hadn't been there a moment before. I was certain of it. But now he sat there, dressed in clothes that looked like they were from the 1950s, looking straight ahead with the same empty expression all the other passengers had worn. Margaret said nothing. She simply turned and walked back to the front of the car, and the doors hissed open. Patricia stood up suddenly. We have to move, she said. What? Why? Because the train is choosing, she said, and for the first time, I heard fear in her voice. When the train stops and brings a new passenger, it's deciding who belongs where. And I think, she grabbed my arm, I think it might be calling you. I'm not getting off, I said, but my voice shook. Not yet, no, Patricia said. But I've seen this before. The pressure builds. The empty seats fill. The train is deciding if you're one of the ones who should stay in the world it's creating, or one of the ones who should go. If it decides you should go, the doors will open and you'll walk out, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. That's insane, I said. Yes, Patricia agreed. But it's happening anyway. We stood there in the center of the car and I could feel it, that pressure building in the air. It was like standing in a room that was slowly being filled with an invisible gas, or standing at the bottom of the ocean where the weight of water was pressing in from all sides. It was suffocating. It was terrifying. The doors were still open. On the platform beyond, I could see the sign, Hollow Crossing. And beyond that, I could see something. A structure that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. Something that didn't look entirely solid. Something that felt wrong. My feet started moving toward the aisle. No, I said, gripping the seat. No, I'm not leaving. But my feet continued moving. It was like my body was being controlled by something outside myself. My hands released their grip and I stumbled forward toward the open doors. Patricia grabbed my hand. Hold on to me, she said. Hold on to something real. I tried to grip her hand, but it felt strange. Not quite solid. It was like trying to hold on to smoke. My fingers passed almost through hers, and I realized with horror that Patricia was beginning to fade. What's happening? I cried. I'm not real enough anymore, Patricia said, and I could see through her now, see the window behind her through her form. I've been here too long. I'm becoming part of the station. I'm becoming part of the train. My feet carried me forward, and I reached out desperately, trying to grab something. The seat, Patricia, anything, but my hands found nothing solid. I was being drawn forward by an invisible force, and I couldn't resist it. I stumbled through the open doors and onto the platform. As my feet touched the concrete, Patricia's hand, barely visible now, released mine. I looked back and saw her transparent form sitting in the seat, and then I saw that there were others there too, fading forms sitting in all the seats. They were the passengers I'd forgotten about. The businessman, the young woman, the man from Vermont. All of them fading, all of them becoming transparent, all of them watching me with empty eyes as I was drawn away. The doors hissed closed behind me. The platform at Hollow Crossing was like something from a fever dream. It was built of brick and stone that didn't quite look solid, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to shift slightly with each step. The air was cold and it had a smell, metallic and wrong, like standing inside a machine. But I wasn't drawn further into the station. Instead, I felt the pull shifting, moving me horizontally along the platform. I had the distinct impression that the train beside me was no longer the Northeast Regional. The doors and windows had changed. The painted numbers on the side were now written in a language I didn't recognize. A new train. A different destination. This was my stop, and now the question was, where did this train go? The doors to this new train slid open and the pull intensified. I was going to board. I had no choice in the matter. Then something shifted. The pressure suddenly released and I stumbled backward. I nearly fell, catching myself on one of the platform pillars. And when I looked up, I saw something that made no sense. My mother was standing on the platform. It was unmistakably her. Gray hair, cut in the style she'd favored for the past 5 years. Her winter coat, the blue one with the silver buttons. Her sensible shoes. Everything about her was exactly as I remembered. But she was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was a look of pity, of profound, heartbreaking pity. "Mom?" I said, and my voice broke. "You have to get back on the train," she said. "The right train. The one you were supposed to be on." "What? Mom, what is this? What's happening?" She stepped closer and I could see that she was slightly translucent. Like Patricia. Like the fading forms on the train. "You're dead," she said gently. "You have been for 2 months now. Since August 18th. The platform tilted. I sat down hard on the concrete, gasping for air. "That's not true," I said. I don't feel dead. I was just in Boston. I just got on the train. I booked a ticket. Everything is normal. Everything is. You died in a car accident, my mother said, sitting down beside me. On Route 93, near the Connecticut border. A truck hit you. You were killed instantly. The funeral was 2 weeks ago. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But as she spoke, something shifted in my memory. Or rather, memories that I'd been avoiding without realizing it suddenly became visible. The moment before impact. The sound of screaming tires. The impact itself, the terrible wrong feeling of my car being crushed, of glass breaking, of something fundamental in my body breaking. And then nothing. And then I was in my apartment, and it was Friday evening, and I had to visit my mother, and I needed to book a train ticket. Except that never happened, my mother said softly. You never went home. You never saw me in the hospital. You never went to my chemotherapy appointments. And you didn't book a train ticket. Your body was in a casket. Everyone you loved was mourning. I pulled away from her, standing up shakily. Then why am I here? Why can I feel the platform? Why can I remember booking the ticket, getting on the train? Because when you die, my mother explained, your mind doesn't accept it immediately. It tries to continue with the last thing you were thinking about, the last thing on your schedule. I was in the hospital. I was going to have chemotherapy. So your mind created a scenario where that was still happening. It created a train that would take you to me. It created a ticket. It gave you passengers and a conductor and a journey that would eventually lead you to understanding. I looked down at my hands. They looked solid. They looked real. I could feel the cold of the platform through my skin. But I don't feel like Patricia, I said. I'm not fading away. I'm not becoming transparent. No, my mother said. You're still in the early stages. You're still caught in denial. Patricia has been riding that train for 56 years because she's been refusing to accept what happened to her. She keeps hoping that if she waits long enough, if she refuses to get off at the final stop, something will change. But nothing changes. Nothing ever changes. I sank back down onto the platform. How long? I asked. How long will I be like this? Until I fade away? Until you accept it, my mother said. Until you let go. Until you stop trying to reach me and understand that you already have. That you're here with me now, even if you can't stay. The train is a mercy. It gives you time to adjust. It gives you a space that's not quite the world of the living and not quite wherever you're supposed to go. It lets you see people like Patricia, people who refuse to let go, so that you understand what happens if you resist. So what do? I asked. You get back on the train, my mother said. The right one. Not the Northeast Regional with Margaret and the endless passengers. But the train that's waiting now at Hollow Crossing. You board it and you let it take you where you're supposed to go. I looked at the new train. Now that I could see it more clearly, I realized that it was different from the first one. This one was beautiful. The metal of its frame seemed to glow with soft light. The windows were clean and clear. It looked like a place where you wouldn't be afraid. And what happens then? I asked. You find out, my mother said. But it won't be bad. It can't be worse than refusing to go and fading away like Patricia. I promise you that. I wanted to ask her more questions. I wanted to know if there really was an afterlife, if there was judgment, if there was punishment or reward. I wanted to know if she'd forgive me for all the times I'd missed her calls because I was busy, for all the times I'd promised to visit and didn't. I wanted to know if my life meant anything. But I could see her fading now. She was becoming transparent, just like she'd said. Soon she would be gone. Mom, I said, standing up quickly, reaching for her. Wait, please don't. I love you, she said, and her voice was almost gone now. I've always loved you. That doesn't stop. Love is the only thing that doesn't get trapped in stations. Love is the only thing that travels between worlds. And then she was gone. I stood alone on the platform at Hollow Crossing. Behind me, the Northeast Regional was pulling away. I could see the passengers through the windows, Patricia and all the others, still waiting, still refusing to accept what had happened to them. I watched as the train disappeared into darkness. In front of me, the other train waited. The beautiful one. Its doors were open. I took a breath. The air felt different now. Less metallic. More real. More like air from the world I'd known, but with something else mixed in. Something that smelled like my childhood. Like my mother's kitchen. Like home. I thought about what would happen if I refused. If I got back on the Northeast Regional. If I followed Patricia's example and spent decades waiting for something to change, watching myself fade away, becoming a ghost haunting a ghost train in a station that didn't exist. I thought about my mother. About the last thing she said. Love doesn't get trapped in stations. I walked toward the train. The doors seemed to welcome me. I could feel warmth coming from inside, could see soft lights illuminating comfortable seats. I could hear music, something distant and beautiful that I couldn't quite identify. As I reached the doorway, I paused. I wanted to leave something behind. Some record of what I'd experienced. Some proof that I'd been real, that my life had mattered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the original ticket. The one that said Greystone Station. The one that had started all of this. I looked at it one more time and I realized that the printing had changed. The destination now reads something else. Something that I couldn't quite read, as if my eyes wouldn't focus on the letters. But I could feel what it meant. It meant home. It meant peace. It meant letting go. I placed the ticket on the platform and stepped onto the train. The doors closed behind me. 3 months after I disappeared, my mother returned to Boston after finishing her chemotherapy. She found my apartment exactly as I'd left it. Coffee mug still on the kitchen counter, half full and moldy. My phone dead on the nightstand. My clothes still in the closet. The printer history still showing the train ticket I'd printed. She showed the police the ticket I'd printed, the one with the wrong destination. She showed them my confirmation from Amtrak, the one that said Portsmouth. She tried to explain that something strange had happened, that the ticket and the confirmation had been different, that there was a station that shouldn't exist. The police found my wrecked car on Route 93 near the Connecticut border. It had been there for 2 months. The accident had been ruled a single vehicle collision. Driver error, they said, though they couldn't determine what the error had been. No skid marks. No signs that I'd tried to brake. It was as if I'd simply driven off the road at full speed. My mother kept the original ticket. The one I'd printed. The one that said Greystone Station. Sometimes she takes it out and looks at it. The destination still seems to shift slightly when she's not looking directly at it. She's never shown it to anyone else. She thinks they wouldn't see what she sees. They wouldn't understand. Last month, she was sorting through some old documents and found a newspaper clipping. An article from 1955 about the abandonment of a railway station in New Hampshire. The station had been demolished and the town had been erased from maps, apparently for various reasons that the article didn't make fully clear. There was a photo. It showed a platform and a station made of brick and stone. The caption read, "The final station at Greystone, NH, moments before demolition." My mother hasn't checked if there are other news articles about disappearances near the Northeast Corridor. She hasn't looked up how many people go missing near trains every year. She hasn't tried to find documentation of a station called Hollow Crossing. But sometimes, late at night, she looks out the window at the railway line that runs behind her property. She wonders if there are trains that run on schedules that normal people don't know about. Trains that stop at stations that don't exist on any map. Trains that take people to places where they need to go, even if they don't know it. And sometimes, on those nights, she could swear she hears the sound of a whistle in the distance. The sound of wheels on tracks. The sound of something impossible approaching through the darkness. And she thinks about the ticket that sits in her drawer. She thinks about trying to take a train herself. She thinks about finding a platform marked with letters that shift when she's not looking. But she doesn't. Not yet. Because she knows that when you board a train with a ticket that says Greystone Station, you don't come back to leave messages. You don't come back to reassure the people who love you. But you do find peace. You do find home. And in the space between stations, in the nowhere places where trains travel when the world isn't looking, that has to be enough.